Yo, what is up guys? Welcome back to the channel. How we all doing? Appreciate all the support lately guys. We are officially 3 months into Final Stand Remastered, and I wanted to take a real quick step back and honestly talk about how this game is doing now that the launch hype has kind of settled down and the noise is not as loud as it was in the beginning. Now this is not a first impressions video. I've been playing Final Stand for over, I'd say 5 years maybe when I was a kid. And I've been playing the remaster practically every single day since it released, except for a little small space between release and maybe 2 weeks into the game. Yeah, I just didn't mess with the game. So I kind of gave it like a 2-hour chance, and then the feeling wasn't there, so I kind of gave up on it. But I came back after like 2 weeks, and a lot of stuff had changed, gotten better, and now I really enjoy the game, and ever since then I've really not stopped playing, to be honest. I've gone through like the early grind, the mid game, end game, mastery, raids, PvE, PvP, all of it, right? So this video is coming from a longtime player who genuinely cares about this game and wants to see it succeed. In this video, I am going to be talking about what changed from the original Final Stand, what the community has been complaining about, what the game does well, and whether Final Stand Remastered is actually an upgrade or just the same game with a fresh coat of paint and better graphics. Alright, let's talk about it. First of all, what is Final Stand Remastered? For all you new people, at its core it's Final Stand, Dragon Ball inspired RPG gameplay, leveling up, unlocking forms, grinding quests, fighting bosses, chasing endgame progression. The core identity is still there, and that's important, right? You kind of want to keep the blueprint from the OG game and remaster it, and I feel like they've done that well. But remasters are clearly meant to be more than just a visual update. It's supposed to be a rebuild, right? The goal was obviously to create a version of Final Stand that feels more modern, more stable, and more sustainable long term, instead of constantly fighting against old systems. And after 3 months of consistently playing this game, with many hours, I can confidently say you can feel the difference, and yes, it is better. The biggest change, and the one you notice immediately, is performance and overall feel. If you played the original Final Stand for a long time, you already know how rough it could be. Lag spikes, abilities not registering, NPCs glitching, getting hit by things that doesn't make sense, bosses teleporting, or things randomly breaking, a shit ton of glitches and bugs, and the game kept breaking. Just a ton of stuff. And I'm also a EU person. I don't know if you guys know that. People think I'm from the US. I play EU, guys. So at least for the EU player, the OG Final Stand was not kind to us. I don't know if it was Snake's fault or it was Roblox or what it was, but the ping issues on EU was crazy back then on the OG game. A lot of the difficulty in the OG Final Stand came from the game itself being unstable. The remastered feels so much smoother overall, combat is more responsive, animations are cleaner, and things generally work the way you expect them to. When you get hit, it usually makes sense. When you miss an attack, it feels fair. And again, not all of the time, it's not perfect by any means, but most of the time, right? There is an exception where it is the game's fault, and it's not your fault, but most of the time. Like I said, is it perfect? No. But compared to the OG Final Stand, it is a massive upgrade. You're spending less time fighting bugs and more time actually playing the game. The combat itself has also changed in a noticeable way. Remastered combat feels slower, heavier, and more controlled. It feels like it actually takes some skill and you control what's going on. Unlike the OG, where you kind of just rock the same moves as everyone else, and you kind of pray and hope for the best, and the person with the better ping probably wins, stuff like that. This actually feels like a kind of skill-based game where having a ranked system makes sense, because there is some skill, not even some, there is a lot of skill included in being good at PvP in Final Stand Remastered. As you probably know if you watched the Bobby stream, I got my we're not talking about that. In the original game, combat could feel chaotic and frustrating. Sometimes it felt like you were losing because of the game, not because you played badly. In Remastered, difficulty feels more intentional. When you lose a fight, it usually feels like a skill issue and not random nonsense. Which is true. Before you guys come screaming in the comments, that is true. If you can't see that, you're naive and you're delusional. Most of the time, It is a skill issue when you die. Yes, I agree. There are still things that need to be fixed. There are bugs. There are things that make it not your fault when you die, but most of the time, right? Think about how many hours you spend fighting NPCs in the game, and are you honestly telling me that every single time you die, it is because of a bug or something that shouldn't happen? That is not true. Let's be honest here. But those things alone makes the game way more enjoyable long term than the OG Final Stand. Now let's talk about mastery, because this is a huge topic for remastered players. In the OG Final Stand, mastery didn't exist, so that's already a negative. I feel like every Dragon Ball game should have some sort of mastery where essentially you use something a lot, meaning you get better at that thing, meaning that that thing gets more powerful. That is the core of Dragon Ball, and it just makes sense. And it's crazy that Dragon Ball games till this day doesn't include mastery on things, on forms, and it just doesn't make sense in my opinion. I find that kind of bizarre. I feel like that is such a core value and essential and important thing in Dragon Ball that it should be in every game. But in Remastered, mastery has real feedback, clear visual progression, star rankings that actually represent completion, and when you fully max a move or a form, it feels like an accomplishment, not just another invisible stat increase. I'm talking from personal experience here. When I master a form, when I perfect a form, I get so happy, bro, because the amount of grind you have to put in. Yes, there is problems with mastery. The amount of grind is insane. But again, like I got a lot of hate for, I kinda enjoy it being grindy because it makes sense. That is canon. I feel like it should be grindy to master your Super Saiyan 3, because Goku is still struggling with it. He still finds Super Saiyan 3 incredibly hard to master and use actively a lot in a long time, right? Or a long period of time. So I feel like it makes sense, and I honestly don't care about the grind aspect, but I just enjoy that the aspect of mastery is there, right? For players who live in the end game, this is a huge dub. It gives you a reason to keep playing beyond just leveling up, so when you hit max level, you have something to do while waiting for space or future or whatever. Now, with all of that said, we need to be honest about the problems, because the game is not perfect at all. One thing is the game passes, and I don't feel like I hear a lot of people talk about this, so that's why I'm bringing it up. The game passes in the Remastered feels like kind of cash grabs and scams, if I'm being honest. The Goku Black and Hit moveset already feel kinda outdated, and we're only at Namek. That is the second world, and the 2 move game passes feel outdated. Yes, there are moves that still hold up, like Divine Lasso and, etc., but the moves shouldn't be this outdated 3 months into the game with 2 worlds, where the worlds are Earth and Namek. The whole reason something is hidden behind a paywall is because it's supposed to be better than the free options, and in this game, they're just not. Just in general, I feel like the game passes you got in the OG felt way more rewarding and worth it than their game passes in the Remastered. One of the biggest complaints, and probably the most common one, is the grind. And this is something that I get a lot of hate for. I don't mind the grind, honestly, but I'm not stupid, right? I can understand for a person who's never played the OG or never played the Remastered, new players, casuals, it can feel very overwhelming and a bit too much, right? Even with the better UI and clearer systems, Final Stand Remastered is still a very grind heavy based game. Some quests take a long time, some mastery paths are brutal, and for casual players or new players, the amount of time required can feel overwhelming. Like I said, veterans are used to it. I hate that word, that sounds so corny, but you understand what I mean. OGs or whatever are used to it, but it doesn't mean it isn't valid criticism. That's my point of it. I like it, but it is still valid criticism for the majority of the game being casuals, right? Another big issue is communication, and this is again leaning towards more of the casual players. There's no codes, updates can feel a bit quiet, and there isn't a clear public roadmap. A lot of players just want to know what's coming next and where the game is headed. And now it is true that the game has a Discord where you could get the scoop on everything, but even so, I feel like there should be a clear roadmap with release dates on when we can expect things. Not obviously say 13th of March, but say between June and July we're getting Future, right? Something like that. If they just made a little roadmap, it would make people feel a lot more secure and just excited. I feel like if I saw that Future or TOP is coming in July, I'd be so like, you know, I'd be so hyped and waiting. So I feel like that's something they could do. Obviously not a huge problem at all, but it is something they could do, which would help the game a little bit. Balancing is still a work in progress. Some races and forms clearly outperform others, right? And while PvE balance is mostly fine except for a couple things that I will get into very shortly, but PvP balance still needs attention. It's not completely broken, but if you play it a lot, you will notice the problems that are there. Now on to PvE. PvE is something that needs work, and a lot of people skip over this like it's not important. This is important, bro. The whole point of the game is a bandit beater. You're supposed to kill NPCs over and over and over again. That is the essential core of this game, and it needs a lot of work. NPCs like Frieza, Burter, and Ginyu are incredibly annoying to fight. I'm not saying that they should get weaker or they're too hard, because they shouldn't and they aren't, but give NPCs a key bar or a key limit, anything, bro, because Frieza spamming Justice combination, instant rising, supernova, death ball, and death saucering with a death beam on top of it within the span of 3 seconds, and then to just go and do it again 3 seconds later is ridiculous. There's no way that should be happening. And then vanishing everywhere and not letting you land anything is so annoying, especially when Frieza has poise. He has that super armor that you need to break, and on top of that, he insta rises anytime you hit him with one M1, and then he Z vanishes everywhere, bro. Dashes everywhere. It's so annoying. Make the NPCs more fightable, I guess is the word I'd use there. Now, that being said, there are things Remastered does extremely well and shouldn't be overlooked. Now, the core combat feels solid. Progression systems actually make sense. Raids and bosses feel more fair, especially in how rewards are handled. Yes, the drop rates are rare, but I kinda like it that way. And most importantly, Remastered still feels like Final Stand. They didn't kill the soul of the game trying to modernize it. The identity is still there, and that's something a lot of remasters get wrong, I feel like. In my personal opinion, they have done Final Stand Remastered as almost perfect as they could have possibly done it, without it making a completely like different game that isn't Final Stand at all. This is the best version of Final Stand you could ever make, in my opinion. Now, let's talk about the age-old question. OG Final Stand versus Final Stand Remastered. OG Final Stand will always be insanely nostalgic. I started playing that game when I was like, you know, 10, 11 maybe. I don't know. A lot of us grew up on that version of the game, but if we're being objective, the remaster is smoother, more stable, easier to understand, and more future-proof, which is super true. Release OG Final Stand and Final Stand Remastered today, and I promise you, Final Stand Remastered will leave the OG in the dust, and the OG will not have more than 100 concurrent players in like, you know, a year. The OG Final Stand was good for its time. It's not a 2026 game. Honestly, it just isn't. And if you don't agree with that, you're blinded by nostalgia, and that's the truth. The OG feels like a classic that belongs to its time. The remastered feels like the version that can actually survive long term and be a good game in 2, 3, 4 years. So, 3 months in, with all of these hours grinded, is Final Stand Remastered good? Yes, it is. It is good, bro. This is a good game. But it's not perfect, but it's absolutely a step forward. If you loved the original Final Stand, this is the best version of that experience. If you're new, it's still grindy, but far more welcoming than the game 3 months ago. Also more welcoming than the OG, if I'm being honest. If the developers keep updating and communicating with us and listening to us, this could easily become the definitive Dragon Ball RPG on Roblox. Best ever. That's my honest take after 3 months. Let me know in the comments what you think. Do you believe the remaster is better than the OG Final Stand? What do you want to be changed next? What do you hate? What do you like? If you enjoyed the video, drop a like and subscribe. Join my Discord, my Roblox community. Subscribe as a member if you want to. You get some little extra perks here and there. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.